Welcome to our webinar this afternoon. Our guest presenter this evening is Lydia. She's been a virtual educator for 3 years, and she's a master's in teaching with an emphasis on Title I schools and cares deeply about equitable online education for middle school students. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone, and thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited that on a Friday afternoon when everybody's just about ready to really check out for the weekend, you all have chosen to come and join us. So thank you very much. I think Karen is going to be able to answer some questions or raise her hand and let me know in the chat pod when there is a question. So please feel free to ask any questions as I go, and I will try to answer them as I go. At the end, I'm also going to give you my email address. So if you have anything that I did not address or that is a more specific question to you, let me know that as well. And I'm happy to converse with you on email or perhaps put you in touch with somebody else at my organization, at my school, who can answer the question for you. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, give me one moment because I need to. Karen, can you just verify that everybody can see that?
Yes, I can see that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. So we're going to focus today on teaching middle school math in grades 5 through 8. These are the things I'm going to try to teach you today, the things that I wish I had known. This is a new paradigm for all of us. This photo is actually my daughter, who is sitting in my office with my computer sitting in on my lessons. I happen to have an 8th grader, and I was like, oh, great, you can join my classes now and just get some extra math attention. So we're all experiencing new things. I'm telling you, this is giving me, as a virtual educator already, a lot of empathy from my students' parents. I'm always sending them all these emails, check this, check that, check this, check that. And it's a lot, because speaking as a parent, it's a lot. All those teacher emails are now coming to me from my own children, and it's a lot. So this is something we are all learning together, no matter how long we've been teaching, how long we've been a parent. It's a lot of it is new. So I'm going to try to teach you tonight what I wish I had known in my very first few days and weeks of teaching. I jumped into my school about 4 years ago, and I was completely overwhelmed. So I want to give you some skills and ideas that you can take with you, not tomorrow, but starting on Monday. Luckily, you guys have the weekend to kind of think maybe this through and think about how you can use some of what we talk about tonight in your classes beginning next week. And again, this might all be different depending on your platform. If you have a platform specific question, you're welcome to type it in the chat pod and ask. I normally use Blackboard. There are 2 versions of Blackboard. One is paid, which is the one my organization uses, and one is free. If you choose to use the free one, it has a lot of really good features, but not all of the ones, of course, of the professional version. Zoom is also great. I think a lot of schools were getting really up and running on Zoom, and then there have been some privacy concerns, but there are lots more. A lot of you might be using Google Classroom, and some of you, we're going to talk a little bit about synchronous sessions versus asynchronous sessions, because I'm understanding that some districts are saying we want you to not do as many synchronous sessions. So we're going to talk about how to design a successful online lesson, how to get that lesson into your platform. Is it PowerPoint? Is it something else? How to kind of frame in your own mind a synchronous lesson, meaning everybody logs into the same platform at the same time, versus an asynchronous lesson that maybe you film and give the link to students that they can watch on their own time. And then I want to talk about, in specifically a synchronous session, how do you check for understanding? And then you're going to take those tools and design your own amazing lessons. And that's going to hopefully reflect your inside the actual classroom personality. I've been so impressed. My youngest son is in 2nd grade, and I've been so impressed watching his teacher take her classroom and bring it to her home and give it to those kids. So your voice is going to come out in your own lesson. And that's obviously a real goal, right? So some things you can move with you from your real classroom to your virtual classroom. I really recommend taking attendance. Students do better with accountability, even if your school says it doesn't count. I know the district where my children go to school, they say it doesn't count. You can't really take attendance, but still having students think that you're taking attendance or registering them when they get there can add a layer of accountability that helps them continue to come. Obviously, do what your district or your school is telling you to do. Some schools are saying don't do this at all and follow those guidelines. There are two ways you can go about taking attendance. In Zoom, for example, you can let students into the classroom one at a time. And if you do that, it gives you another layer of accountability and attendance, but also security. So you know that you can verify who's logging in. You can prevent students, for example, from logging in under a different name. I do not recommend ever letting a student log in under a different name, because you don't know who's really on the other end of that camera or computer, obviously. You can also do it when they're in class by doing a roll call. That, depending on the age of your students, some of them are really anxious to use the mic. If you've got 5th graders or 6th graders, that might be kind of fun. It also works as a mic and camera check. They get to practice clicking mute on their computer or on their tablet, and then clicking unmute and turning their camera off and on. So that might be something you want to do. On the other hand, it takes up a lot more time to do it that way. So there might be a happy medium in there somewhere. But just adding that layer of accountability so students know they're expected to come and that you are waiting for them to come and you are noticing if they don't come. And then what I do for my sessions is I always send an email immediately afterwards to the student and their learning coach, whether that's a parent, a sibling, whoever, saying, oh, I really missed Susie Q in my lesson today. Please make sure she comes next time, just so they know that you noticed they weren't there, right? Another thing that can stay the same is give feedback. In live class sessions, you can give feedback when a student is either typing in the chat pod or writing on the whiteboard. Giving them feedback on the spot makes them feel like they're at school, right? It adds another layer of accountability. Making sure that they are turning in assignments. And again, this varies, I think, dramatically by district. Some districts are saying they can still get grades. Some districts are saying they can't. But sending emails to parents or guardians and students for late or missing assignments just helps them to make sure that they get it turned in. Some of these students can feel really overwhelmed by the amount of work that they have. And so if you're in a middle school setting specifically, they might be getting work from you, the math teacher. They might be getting ELA and science and history and everything else. My students are having PE Zoom meetings too, so my own children. So there's a lot going on. And then make sure that you go over assignment due dates and instructions in class, whether it is synchronous or asynchronous. Just make sure students are well aware of when things are expected to be due. Feedback is obviously going to vary in structure, depending not only on your platform, but also how assignments are completed. So are they doing work in the classroom, in your virtual classroom? Are they turning it in through Google Classrooms, for example, or some other way, or email? How they turn it in is going to depend on how you give that feedback. So in terms of synchronous and asynchronous classes, how do you think about how you want to structure those? There are some pros and cons to both. There are real pros actually to both. For synchronous, one of them is class bonding. You all have been in your classroom with your students almost a whole year, and I guarantee that you miss them and they miss you. So in terms of class bonding, synchronous sessions are really great, and especially when a student might be kind of at loose ends all day with not a lot to do and not able to go to the park or not able to do, a lot with their friends. You might want to have them come just for the bonding, and you can do in a live setting group projects, problems, do a breakout room. You get live time feedback on how they're understanding the concept or what they are doing. And it also, you can look a student face to face or at least talk to them and they can hear your voice in terms of being accountable for turning in work. In asynchronous lesson, one of the, I think, most overlooked benefits of online education is that when, like, for example, tonight, we're recording this session and you can go back and watch it again. I'm not telling you you're going to spend your weekend watching this, right? But it is really beneficial for a student to be able to go back in and watch the math lesson again. I think especially for math, or science, when you have math-based science, it is really nice to be able to go back in and watch again. So you might, for example, want to send out a link of an asynchronous session. It could just be you doing a Zoom meeting with yourself, right? You eliminate some security concerns. It's just you. You can send that lesson out to the students and they can take notes. They can turn in the notes if you want them to do that. They can watch it as many times as they need to, or they can put you on pause while they do an example problem and then continue. And I think a big one in terms of access here is that in busy households, students can watch your video when they have a break, or when there's not a one-to-one student to tablet ratio. You know, if you're sharing an iPad with your little brother, you may not be able to log into a live Zoom meeting because your brother's got the iPad. So that is a real benefit of an asynchronous lesson. Students can do it on their own time when there's either a calm moment or an available moment for them to do so. So what should students do before they get to a synchronous session? I think this is a little bit different in terms of moving from brick and mortar to an online setting. For live sessions, I think students should come prepared if they can with their book, a pencil, a notebook, a calculator if they need to, and theoretically in an area where they can work, at a desk, at a table, somewhere quiet. That is kind of a pipe dream for some students. They might have a lot of people at home. It may not be possible. But those students maybe should be encouraged to just have their microphone on mute. The real key here, I think, is that students should be asked to review the material before coming to class. These classes are not going to be probably as long as they are in a brick and mortar classroom. And so they have to be more compact, more focused. And if you can get your students to have an idea of what's coming, my experience is that has been really helpful. So maybe tell them, come prepared, read your math book, math 4.14, and then come to class and we'll discuss it and we'll do some example problems. Some of your students will do that, some of them won't, but at least it kind of gives you some inroads, and that valuable time that you have, you can put it to good use. So these are the rules that I developed with my class at the beginning of the year. And every year we do this in the beginning, just like you probably do with your classroom. It might be worth it to go back and adjust, if necessary, those rules for an online class. My #1 rule is please participate. You know, it's very hard sometimes to know what's going on with a student when you're not face-to-face with them in a classroom. So my rule is please participate. There is no wrong answer. It's just an answer, and we'll talk about what to do if it's not the correct answer, right? Remain on topic, follow teacher directions. Using the whiteboard, if you have one available in your platform, is a big, big deal. Depending especially on the age of the students, my experience, and I was in 5th grade and now I teach 8th grade, the 5th graders really, really want to use the tools and the microphone and the camera. The 8th graders are much more kind of hesitant to do that, but your experience might be different. Just make sure that everybody kind of uses the whiteboard respectfully. And a big one for me is not to share any kind of personal information. No hashtags, no Roblox names, whatever is going on, I don't want them sharing it in my platform. And so just kind of developing your own rules, and you might add rules as you go and you kind of see how your students are acting on your platform and see what they're doing. But I think kind of setting the ground rules before an online lesson is important. And I put this slide up in the beginning of every one of my synchronous sessions. So some things are going to be really pretty different. One of them, I think, is the length of the lesson. There might be 15 minutes of direct instruction. I'm focusing mainly tonight on direct instruction because I think that's the easiest type of lesson to jump into when you're moving into an online forum. Students have different attention spans online. They may be getting, you know, messenger notes in the corner of their computer or their iPad as you're doing the work. It may be that they've got their Zoom camera on, but the Zoom camera is looking at the ceiling. It can be really challenging to keep them focused for longer than 15 to 20 minutes, anywhere in the middle school age group. Again, having them look at the lesson so they kind of know what they're coming for is helpful maybe. And Students can do practice problems in most of these platforms. In Zoom, they have the ability to have whiteboard tools if you share them. In Blackboard, they have the ability to have whiteboard tools if you share them. You can do the same thing in a Google Classroom. So I think it's really valuable to have students be able to participate live in a live class. For math, this is where it gets really important, right? How do you engage them? How do you watch their work? How do you see whether they're understanding the concept? I give a lot of practice problems, and I usually set the timer. This was something it took me a while to learn, so I'm trying to pass this tidbit on to you. It took me a long time to understand that I was not giving enough think time or hang time in an online setting, because I'm sitting at my end of the computer and it seems like I've been sitting here a long time being very quiet, right? But really, the students who I cannot always see are doing that practice problem on their own, and it's taking them longer than I feel that it, it's taking them longer than feels comfortable to me to wait. So I usually do 2 to 3 minutes on a timer for every single practice problem. If you are doing a direct instruction lesson, that may only mean that you're doing 2 or 3 practice problems in a live session. But trust me, when you're sitting for 2 minutes being quiet as the teacher, it is helpful to have a timer because it seems like forever, especially in the beginning. And especially when you can't, if you can't, look over your students' work to kind of see where they are in the problem. So I want to go through with you. I just put in here the first few slides from one of my recent lessons. I normally follow the same basic structure. I do some kind of either cartoon that relates to math somehow. I love when we get to anything to do with pi, because there are so many funny pi cartoons on the internet. So, but I usually have some kind of cartoon or activity question for the students when they come in. We talk quickly about the standard. I try to connect it to their real lives, followed by kind of the direct instruction part of the lesson, practice problems, and then I always do a breakout room exit ticket, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, because that was a place I think a lot of people might have questions. But here's my little cartoon for when they're logging in. Another helpful hint I always do is I start my class actually 5 minutes after the scheduled time, because trust me, there are always plenty of people that have a connection issue, or their computer is slow, or they're just, still rounding up their paper and pencil. So just giving them a little bit of a login time, I think, is helpful. But I thought this cartoon was really funny. And obviously today we're talking about parallel lines and transversals. So, and then this is me just checking their notes from the previous day. So the day before we did a lesson on vertical angles, and I want them to go back in their math notebook and read me what they have. I also have my students turn in their math notes to me once a week on Fridays. So for example, today they had to turn in math notes on something that we had done this week, just one page, just so I know that they've actually been doing it. And even in my virtual school, we can't give them credit for that right now, but they are turning it in every Friday just so I can see that they've been taking the math notes. Oops, I think I skipped let me see if I can go back. There we go. Here's the lesson standard, just the goal and the actual state standard. I don't usually spend a lot of time on that. And then here's where I connect it to something that they can relate to. So what are parallel lines? They're never going to intersect. They always have the same slope when they're on a graph. And then the part that students usually really kind of start to tune in is, can they think of something that's formed with parallel lines? Obviously, these train tracks, you'll get all kinds of kids giving different answers, but this is a good way to get them engaged, make sure that they actually are engaged, and also have them kind of use the whiteboard tools, just kind of get them warmed up. And then what this slide I want to show you, one of the things that I was really stumped by when I started teaching exclusively online is, how do I make a PowerPoint presentation that is relevant and that is going to work in an online platform? So my advice to you is, let the internet help you. This slide looks a little bit confusing, but I did a screenshot of my computer. You can Google PowerPoints for any subject, and it is amazing what wonderfully smart teachers have already put online that you can borrow from, take practice problems from, take one slide from this presentation and put it into your own, just get ideas. I have hundreds, maybe at this point, thousands of PowerPoints saved on my computer. I don't think I've ever used an entire one from somebody else, but I do kind of borrow and take ideas and concepts from other people's. And in my opinion, that is the best way to get up and running by Monday. Go look through the internet and see what's already there and don't reinvent the wheel. And then if you want your slides to look fancy, right up here in the top right corner, there's that design ideas button in your PowerPoint, and it can change your PowerPoint to look any of these ways over here on the right-hand side. So just kind of get creative. Some people like plain PowerPoints. Some people want it to look fancy. That's completely personal preference, but it's an easy way, in my experience, to go from basic to making it look like you have, well, I'll speak for myself. It made me look like I had more skills than I actually did. You all might have really good PowerPoint skills already, but when I started, I was struggling with how do I get my slides to look professional. And you know what? I have a feeling that students don't care about this nearly as much as I think that they do, but it makes you feel good to have a good looking lesson, right? My next piece of advice is get a snipping tool. This applies whether you have PowerPoint or it applies whether you're using any kind of synchronous session. Because with this handy little snipping tool, it looks just like this, that on mine, this little white mountains with a moon over it. Your computer probably already has it. You can search for that snipping tool and paste it to your toolbar. And then you can snip any piece of information from your screen and paste it into your synchronous session. That means you could search for a problem. That means you could search for a happy birthday banner and paste that on the top of your lesson that day if you've got a birthday student. There's so much you can do with a snipping tool. My favorite thing to do is just take math problems from different worksheets online and paste them into the classroom, because then you don't have to write out the problem every single time. And if it has a lot of squares or square roots, it's hard to type those things. And using a snipping tool eliminates some of that hassle. So now you've taught your direct instruction lesson. How do you check for comprehension in either a synchronous or an asynchronous lesson? I hope that you all at some point get comfortable with using the chat function. I was terrified of chat for a very long time, and I think that was with good reason. I usually, now this is in Blackboard that I usually teach most of my classes, and I go back and forth now between Blackboard and Zoom, but in both Blackboard and Zoom, you can have the chat just go to the teacher. And for 8th graders and 7th graders especially, I really recommend doing that. There's just too much opportunity, probably even 5th and 6th graders, I would do the same thing. There's too much opportunity for behind the scenes chit chat. And I've always been amazed at how much I am not able to keep up with chat when I'm really focused on teaching my lesson. Even though teachers are really good, you know, we're all really good multitaskers, right? But it is hard to do that in an online platform. So maximize the chat function. And what I mean by that is I will put a problem on the whiteboard and I'll say, everybody type your answer in chat. And then I'll set the timer for 2 minutes and have students do the work and type their answer in chat. Some will do the problem obviously really quickly. Some are going to take a little bit longer. But when the fast ones turn in their work, you have an ability to type to them directly. And they have an ability to ask any questions that they want. Same with the ones that work a little bit more slowly. So I try to have the students answer in chat, and then I respond to each of them individually, which is a good feature if you don't have a completely open chat. If you are setting up a Blackboard room, normally that feature is already on. The chat just comes to the teacher, and students cannot chat to each other. If you are setting up a Zoom meeting, Zoom has an unbelievable number of features that you can choose when you're setting up the meeting. One of those features is having chat just go to the moderator. and that would be you, the teacher. So in a lot of these platforms, you can also set up breakout rooms. I adore breakout rooms. This is one place where I think online learning is really beneficial, because you can put each student in their own breakout room and they are working on their own problem on the whiteboard. Or you can put them in pairs in a breakout room and 2 people can work on a problem, or one person can, you can do think, pair, share. You can do a partner check where one person does a problem, the other one checks it, the other person does a different problem, the first one checks it. I really like to use breakout rooms. I was terrified of them at first. And I will tell you, part of it is just, depending on your platform, kind of experimentation and seeing how things go. But now at the end of every lesson, I use a breakout room. I put 1 student per room. So for example, if I have 15 students in my class, in my math small group, I'll set up 15 breakout rooms. I'll copy my slide for my exit ticket into each one of those breakout rooms, which usually you can do just as one step. It's copy slide to all breakout rooms. And then 1 student gets popped into each breakout room, and they can do their work without fear of anybody else seeing it. So if you have a shy student or a student that does not want to write on the board and have everybody else see their work, this is a really good way to check for comprehension for them. What I spend the last 10 minutes of pretty much every class doing is just jumping in and out of breakout rooms. If your platform has a hand raising feature, and I think most do, you can have a student raise their hand so that you know to come in if they either have a question or if they're finished. And so I really encourage you to kind of play around with breakout rooms and see how they work for you. I've done a lot of experimentation. My favorite way to use them overall is for, in a math class especially, is for exit tickets. I also do this, and again, this will depend on whether, what your district or your school is allowing you to do. At my school, we're not allowed to do this right now, but I'm a big fan of using breakout rooms to have students complete missing work. If you have not turned in an assignment that was due, I will on Friday afternoon have you come to my class, mandatory class, and you can sit there in a breakout room and get that work done. Again, that depends on how much accountability you're allowed to give students during this time of school closure or online learning. Here are some slides that I use to check for comprehension. So for example, I would put this slide into a breakout room, and then the students would have the whiteboard tools and they can go ahead and graph the points and calculate the slope. So they would just do that right on this slide and then raise their hand to tell me they're done, and I'll pop into the room and then I'll say, yep, Susie Q. My virtual students always name Susie Q. You can go for the day, and then she can just pop herself out of the class, right? Here's another one. I always have them write their name on their exit ticket. This is for my benefit, so that at the end, depending on your platform, you can save the slides, or if you're recording the lesson, if you didn't get to every breakout room, you can go back and review and really see who completed their exit ticket, who got it correct, who didn't fully understand the concept, and address it either with them or in a small group or with the whole group the next day. So I always have them put their name on the exit ticket and just make sure I know who they are, and I save those at the end. So again, student engagement is key. This is one, I think, of the challenges. We've talked about a couple of significant benefits of online learning. I think this is one of the challenges. It's hard to know who's paying attention. It's hard to know who's daydreaming. Again, a benefit of exit tickets is breakout rooms is if you put some students in a breakout room and nobody's writing anything on the board, they are probably not engaged. So I have no problem calling on students who are not answering, just cold calling on them. I reinforce students who are answering, and the same as in a brick and mortar school, you're probably going to figure out pretty quickly who's always got the answer to the question and who really does not want to be called on. And one of my rules is everybody has to participate in their own way. And again, one of the nice things about an online forum is that if you have a student that doesn't want to speak on the mic in front of everybody, they can type to you directly in chat. And you can either address that on a general level, or you can type back to them in chat, and they don't have to be called on in front of the whole class. Sometimes I feel like I'm on the radio, I'm engaging tonight, I'm engaging in kind of one-way conversation, but that's okay. Your students are still there. If they can see you, I guarantee they're happy to see your face. I'm sure that they miss you. And something that's been thrilling for me is hearing my own kids say, wow, I can't wait to go back to school. I'm never going to say, I wish I didn't have to go to school again. I'm sure that they will say that, but it's really nice that they realize the privilege that they have in actually going to school every day. I'm hoping that lasts into next year when they hopefully theoretically go back. So what works well in an online environment? Some things you can try: put 2 students into each breakout room and have one do a problem and the other correct that problem, and then switch. You might want to put 2 problems up so they're not both doing the same problem. What you'll do as the teacher during that scenario is you're going to jump into the breakout room to check student work and just, first of all, make sure that they are working. Depending on your platform, you may be able to see on the right-hand side exactly what's happening in each breakout room. That varies, unfortunately, by the platform. So you might kind of have to figure it out, but jump in and out, and the students will see you coming, see the teacher coming, and they're going to get to work. And again, the exit ticket: put just 1 student in each breakout room so that they can complete work on their own, and you can see exactly how they're doing in that process. Obviously, your role during the exit ticket is to check work either during or after class, and answering any questions as they go along. So, and then I always say, your job when completing an exit ticket is to either give me the answer or go as far in that problem as you can, and then type on the whiteboard where you got stuck, how you got stuck, what your question is, how I can help you. So that when I pop into your breakout room, you already have something on the board that tells me where you're stuck and where I can help you. Some group activities to try: you can put a piece of paper, or I guess it's not a piece of actual paper, but a slide on the board that gives each student 1 square, and they can show their own work. You can have them put their name in the box. You can have them not put their name in the box, depending on how anonymous you want it to be. You can do a problem on the whiteboard where you make a mistake and have the students find the mistake. Most of these platforms have like a pointer finger tool or some other kind of whiteboard tool that they can point to the error, or they can type it into chat, or they can raise their hand when they find it. There are lots of ways that you can make that work for you. I usually, a couple times a week, 2 or 3 times a week, choose a student to show their math notes on camera. Some students are not really comfortable doing this, but actually most are. It's kind of like show and tell. They want to get called on. So I usually do that in the beginning of class, as a quick little notes check. And also, it has been helpful to my class because, again, we're not all together, and student A can't see that student B is over there taking notes, and maybe student B is really organized. And so you can have students show notes who you think are going to have nice organized notes to be a good example to the class. So I do that at least once a week, and they usually like to do, I do it more than once a week normally, but they like to be on camera and show their notes on their camera. So what would an asynchronous session look like? Obviously, we're not doing breakout rooms. We're not doing group whiteboard activities. Probably you'll do a video of a direct instruction lesson, right? Shorter is better. I said 15 to 30 minutes. I really think it should probably be more on the 15-minute side of that. And it might, again, be helpful to request, if you can, that students turn in notes from that lesson, either notes or practice problems or both. That's really easy to do if you have a Google Classroom. They can email them to you. My experience with having students email work is that all of a sudden you have an awful lot of emails to go through. So I really try to avoid, I am very strict about having students upload their math notes, upload their math homework, upload their math tests to an outside platform, so that I am not combing through my email, making sure that I have every math test turned in. Depending on how you want to do your lesson, it may be helpful to have an external camera. But again, you know, I'm not going out at all these days. So you may or may not have access to an external camera. You can also record yourself in, for example, a Zoom classroom. You can do a Zoom classroom for free. A lot of you have probably already done this. And then you can send out the link for that to your whole class and they can watch it on their own time. I added the Zoom bombing because a couple of weeks ago, nobody had heard of Zoom bombing, and now it is a concern in a lot of districts and schools. So if you're concerned about Zoom bombing, just doing a Zoom meeting with your own self and taping it and sending out the recording. Well, now you know how old I am. I've said taping it, but recording it and sending out the recording link prevents Zoom bombing in almost all cases. So if that is a concern, that might be something to try. So thank you so much for coming. I'm really privileged to have been able to share. I don't even know if we're at an hour or close to an hour.
If you all go to cta.org/IPD trainings, you'll find the link for all of our recordings. It takes up to a week for us to post those. So just be patient, and I appreciate your patience. And we also have handouts and everything you can get right there. Kristen does have a question. Do you have to get parent permission to record students? That's a great question.
That's a really good question. At our school, we have that as part of the contract that this parent and the student and the school sign. I would say definitely check with your administration. It may be that if you're recording a session, you don't have their cameras on, for example. If you're doing a Zoom meeting, you can have students have their camera on, you can have students have their camera off. It may be that you have the cameras off for a recording, but I would say verify that with your administration or with your district.
Thank you very much, everybody.